Hey everybody, it's Saru, aka Scott, aka Scotty Too Hottie, ya boy, coming to you with another episode of the Sengoku series. Today I just wanted to do a short video, another epilogue, rather than jump into the Tokugawa Ieyasu series, which I'm still currently researching. I thought I would discuss a few things related to the Hideyoshi series of videos I completed recently. And the first thing off the bat is one of my followers, one of my wonderful, amazing followers, Phantom of the School, commented it on a previous video that when I was discussing the Komaki campaign, when Hideyoshi and Tokugawa Ieyasu went briefly to war in 1584, I had sort of left out the pretext that Ieyasu had used to start this conflict, which was to push the claim of Oda Nobuo, aka Oda Nobukatsu, one of Nobunaga's sons. And I just sort of framed it as, a conflict between Ieyasu and Hideyoshi, without mentioning the Oda Nobuo connection. So, first of all, I'm sorry for omitting that and leaving that out, and thanks for following Phantom of the School. And I just wanted to address this by reading from A.L. Sadler's book about Ieyasu, in which he discusses the Komaki campaign, or at least its reason for starting. So I'm going to read from chapter 13. This is the beginning of chapter 13, just after Hideyoshi has defeated Akechi Mitsuhide and then asserted himself as basically the successor to Nobunaga. So this is after the defeat of Shibata Katsue, who had pushed the claim of the second son of Oda Nobunaga, Nobutaka, unsuccessfully. So now Ieyasu and Nobuo were then the only powers he had to fear, he being Hideyoshi. And Hideyoshi tried to deal with them first by diplomatic methods, for he is said to have offered Ieyasu the two provinces of Mino and Owari if he would throw in his lot with, or actually under him, but Ieyasu could not be tempted. On the other hand, he made overtures to three of Nobuo's chief counselors to undermine their allegiance, and this it was that led to an open breach. Nobuo had them put to death and appealed to Ieyasu to help him against Hideyoshi. Ieyasu at once consented. No doubt he anticipated a collision sooner or later, for Hideyoshi's ambition was not compatible with any equal in the empire, and calculated that no better occasion was likely to present itself than this. It might appear that he would have done better to have thrown in his lot with Shibata, for their allied forces might easily have overthrown Hideyoshi, but in that case the question would hardly have been much nearer a solution, for Shibata was also formidable. And then there were the claims of the two brothers Nobutaka and Nobuo. Now the stage was clearer, for the former was out of the way, and Nobuo was in reality quite commonplace and not very strong, so that while he appeared to be the leader, in reality he really was only a tool of Ieyasu. So even though I should have mentioned it, the reason I kind of left it out is because, as Sadler says, Nobuo, aka Nobukatsu Nobuo, was basically a tool of Ieyasu, was basically a veneer over which, Ieyasu was really going into conflict with Hideyoshi out of self-interest to kind of assert himself and retain some of the autonomy that he had under Oda Nobunaga. So that's why I left it out, but again, I should have included it, and I'll definitely talk about it when I do my Ieyasu video series next. And the other thing I wanted to discuss in this video was Hideyoshi and some of his irrational actions towards the end of his life, and really the question of his sanity. And something that had occurred to me while I was doing research for the Hideyoshi videos was, maybe some of these things could be explained by him going insane. And considering he was such a, notorious philanderer, what if he had gotten, a sexually transmitted disease that had made him go crazy? And then recently I saw a thread on the forums, in the Samurai Archives forums, about a thesis that someone had written basically arguing that he did have syphilis, which is one of those sexually transmitted diseases that makes you lose your mind. So thanks to my university, I was able to obtain this thesis, and I thought I would read, obviously not the whole thing because that would take a very long time, but just the last chapter, which kind of summarizes the argument. And this is by David Nielsen. And I wish I could share this with other people, but because it's only available to me through my university, and there's a copyright intellectual property issue, I can't just make it available for everybody. So if you're part of a university library or whatever, if you have access to the one that you went to school at, usually if you're an alumni, they'll give you some sort of library access. You might be able to obtain it yourself, or if you're a student like me. So Hideyoshi was a man who lived under great stress, probably for most of his life. His rise to the ranks of the Oda army was a constant uphill battle waged against those who were less capable than himself, yet were entitled to a degree of deference because of the status of their family lineage. Hideyoshi was well aware of this, and for the rest of his career harbored a sense of insecurity about himself, which led him to pursue things on a bigger and grander scale as a means of demonstrating his ability and worthiness. Particularly up to the time that unification was achieved, Hideyoshi's lineage proved to be a problem as he set about subjugating his social superiors. For example, in 1585, Hideyoshi received appeals from several Kyushu daimyo to curtail the growing influence of the Shimazu family, whose lineage stretched back to the Kamakura Bakufu, which was the first shogunate established by the Minamoto in, I believe, the 12th century. When Hideyoshi, in the name of the emperor, ordered the Shimazu to make peace with their neighbors, the Shimazu, laughed at the idea of Hideyoshi, an upstart, being appointed to the high office of Kampaku, that is, the imperial regent, and said His Majesty the Emperor must have made a hasty choice. And he's quoting Sansum there. The Shimazu, of course, soon found out that regardless of his pedigree, Hideyoshi was a man to be reckoned with. As was his custom when he achieved victory over the Shimazu, rather than wiping them out, as Nobunaga would have done, he spared them and reconfirmed their lands and titles. This sort of mercy by Hideyoshi, which characterized the middle stages of his career after the death of Nobunaga, disappeared sometime around the time that he took the office of imperial regent, Kampaku, if we are to believe the Meino family. While several historians have suggested that Hideyoshi simply succumbed to unlimited and unchecked power, they have never seriously considered the personal aspects of Hideyoshi's life as factors in the equation of his mental health. He has generally been characterized as a Caesar or Napoleon, a man with unlimited power and no authority other than his own to whom he had to answer. Hideyoshi was very attached to certain members of his large extended family and very reliant on others for advice and balance. Certainly his family and personal life had a significant bearing on how he carried out the public aspects of his life. Hideyoshi must have been frustrated by both his lack of success in becoming a father and by the failure of those offspring which he did have, biological or not, to survive. There is no doubt that Hideyoshi was devastated by the death of Tsurumatsu, and later obsessively concerned with the health and well-being of Hideyori. His wife, Nene, whom as we have seen he relied upon for both advice and restraint, became jealous and somewhat estranged as he spent more of his time and attentions on younger women with whom he hoped to produce an heir. Nearly all who have written on Hideyoshi have commented on the closeness of the relationship he had with his mother. Very little is known about Naka, other than the fact that she was a peasant woman whose son doted on her and was exceedingly concerned about her health. Nearly all the available information on Naka comes from her son's letters to her. Likewise, we know little of Hideyoshi's brother, Hidenaga, other than the fact that he was a trusted aide, an able general, and apparently had an ability to remonstrate with Hideyoshi when no one else could intervene for fear of being punished by the Taiko, the retired regent. If we look closely at the chronology of events from 1589 to 1592, it is apparent that Hideyoshi underwent what must have been an extremely emotional and traumatic series of events. In 1589, May 27th, Tsurumatsu was born to Yodo, giving Hideyoshi a long-desired son and heir. In 1590, unification was complete, if unstable, and Hideyoshi was riding the crest of his career. It is hard to imagine that he could have been anything less than completely satisfied. However, in 1592, a series of unfortunate, unhappy, and very personal series of events began. On January 22nd, Hidenaga died, leaving Hideyoshi without the man who was probably his most trusted ally, and a valuable anchor who managed to control some of his brother's more impulsive, destructive, and ill-considered decisions. Sen no Rikyu was to die a month later at Hideyoshi's order, that being the famous tea master, a decision he later seems to have regretted. Rikyu had been a friend, advisor, and confidant of the Taiko, and their time together was invaluable in helping Hideyoshi to acquire the veneer of culture which he so desperately needed if he were to be successful in dealing with well-born and well-educated warriors and aristocrats. 6 months later, on August 5th, his son Tsurumatsu died, bringing the number of Hideyoshi's children who died very young to 3. Hideyoshi was, by all accounts, totally devastated. Hidetsugu, his adopted son and heir, was made Hideyoshi's heir on December 27th, 1591. Finally, on July 22nd, 1592, Hideyoshi's mother died. Some accounts say that he was so shocked at the news of her death that he fainted on the spot. This period of 2 years and 2 months was an emotional roller coaster for Hideyoshi, and it should come as no surprise if he made some poor decisions under such trying circumstances. The next few years were little better. August 3rd, 1593 brought the birth of Hideyori, and Hideyoshi immediately went about making desperate arrangements for the infant to succeed him. The personal and political realms of Hideyoshi's life were impossibly wedded from that time on, creating great stress within not just the immediate family, but the clan and its myriad dependents. The country was divided up between Hidetsugu on the one hand and Hideyoshi and Hideyori on the other, creating an environment of anxiety about the future, and forcing people to choose one of the two factions within the Toyotomi family. In 1594, April 6, Hidetsugu's brother died an unnatural death, only 2 months before Hidetsugu was forced to commit ritual suicide, seppuku, and Hideyoshi attempted to exterminate his entire family, that is, the family of Hidetsugu. Hideyoshi spent the remaining 4 years attempting to put together some sort of stewardship plan for Hideyori. His failing health could only have increased his anxiety, and his last days were spent drifting in and out of touch with reality. He ordered the daimyo to sign yet another oath of allegiance to Hideyori, which was futile. His last rational act was to order Ieyasu to order the recall of the troops from Korea. All this sums up the major events of the last decade of Hideyoshi's life from a personal perspective. We have not even considered the political aspects of his life, including the Korean invasion, which spanned the last 8 years of his life. Various problems came with the introduction of Christianity, its immediate acceptance and growing popularity, as well as the rapidly growing presence of Europeans in Japan. On the international front, Hideyoshi was aware and concerned with the European presence in Greater Asia and the rivalries which continued to play out in the new Eastern venue. Also excluded are the problems he faced in attempting to create a stable government and lasting peace now that unification had been achieved. Hideyoshi had a plate full to overflowing with personal, political, economic, military, diplomatic, and various other concerns, many of which were new from a Japanese perspective. Hideyoshi had to learn this new game as it was being played, both learning and making rules as he went along. The pressures he experienced military and politically, nationally and internationally, were totally unprecedented in Japanese history. Now, consider all that Hideyoshi had upon his shoulders and factor in the possibility, a very strong possibility, that in addition to all those things, he may have suffered from syphilis. The symptoms, treatments, inability to reproduce, and behavioral changes are all good individual indicators that syphilis was present. In combination, these factors make for a very strong hypothesis. Under these circumstances, the most likely possibility is that in the middle 1580s, Hideyoshi, through any one of numerous sexual contacts, contracted the disease. General paralysis of the insane, GPI, which is a symptomatic of the final stage of syphilis, usually takes many years to manifest itself and often never develops. However, as syphilis reacts differently in each afflicted individual, GPI has been known to appear in much shorter periods of time. It is entirely possible that Hideyoshi had started to enter the last stage of syphilis and had begun to attack his brain, impacting his rationality and judgment in subtle ways right at the pinnacle of his success. It has been noted that on rare occasions that GPI greatly stimulates mental activity of men for a short while to such an extent that they do the greatest work of their careers. Hideyoshi showed many of the classic physical symptoms of GPI, such as painful joints, character changes, and probably exhibited signs of nervous exhaustion and possibly impotence. If Hideyoshi had GPI, it never reduced him to total insanity, but interfered with his judgment to such a degree that he acted rashly, impulsively, and often violently. Hideyoshi carried on much as he had before, and as the disease impacted his thinking and decision making, we see the patterns demonstrated in this thesis begin to develop and take on recognizable form by 1590, perhaps a bit earlier. When his personal life began to collapse around him following the deaths of 3 of his immediate family members, the death of Hidanaga in particular seems to have been a significant turning point. Hideyoshi was left without a moral anchor. He never irretrievably lost control, but more and more often was subject to fits of rage during which he made horrible errors of judgment. Unlike later syphilis with GPI, his mental debilitation didn't bring him into conflict with the law, only because he was a law unto himself. His blind hopes that Hideyori would succeed him are a good indication that Hideyoshi had lost the powers of judgment and foresight, which had been the linchpins of his success. His thinking that the elimination of Hidetsugu would clear the way for his son were equally desperate and unrealistic. The same can be said for his expectations that the daimyo, in particular Ieyasu, who was never a vassal to Hideyoshi, would honor their agreements to look after Hideyori's interest once his father had died. Not every decision made by Hideyoshi had to have been incrementally poorer than the one which came before it. He made decisions which were probably quite sound, such as the decision to execute a few Christians by way of example, only a short time after having ordered that his own nephew's entire family be executed. Hideyoshi's course was not one of constant decline, but an erratic one, in which good, bad, and horribly considered decisions occurred randomly, but which over the course of a decade or so demonstrated a general pattern of decline. The last decade of the Taiko's life was a very difficult time, even if one does not factor in the possibility of syphilis into the equation. Such stresses and personal travails could have broken many an ordinary man, but Hideyoshi was no ordinary man. He did and achieved more in his lifetime than could ever have been expected of someone born to his insignificant station in life. Over the course of his career, he worked tirelessly, exhibited great loyalty, burning the candle at both ends for the entire span of his lifetime. It is no wonder that in the end, like used tea leaves, he was entirely spent. So, this is conjecture, and it's kind of why I didn't really include it in my video, because, it's something fun to think about, but there's really no way to confirm or deny this hypothesis, because, you can't go back and, see if you really did have syphilis. Not that he would have probably told you if you could take a time-traveling machine to 1590 or 91 or 2 or whatever. Yes, his decision to, go all in with Hideyori, his really, brutal laying to waste of Hidetsugu and all his family members, his belief that, if he just got Ieyasu to say a pledge of loyalty to Hideyori, that would be enough to ensure a stable continuation of the Toyotomi clan as the supreme rulers in Japan. I talked about in my last video how sort of insane this was. And I think, Nielsen makes a very good argument for just the general stress and loss that Hideyoshi suffered in those later years. And how, like he said, they could have broken any man. And I think that's true. Hideyoshi was a very energetic, a very active person. Because he came from this lower class, he had to work twice as hard as, those who were born samurai or into the nobility to sort of prove himself. So I think it's entirely reasonable to assume that, he, went through periods of depression, mania, you just kind of have a nervous breakdown, a meltdown. It's not necessary that he had, syphilis, for example, even though, he did sleep around a lot. He was a philanderer. He was desperately trying to have an heir. And, his inability to produce an heir, also suggests that there was something wrong with his, reproductive system going on. But, it's hard to know. It's impossible to prove. I think this is, so it's a very good, well-written thesis, but when it comes to this sort of, speculation, when it comes to history, the sort of, what ifs or, these questions, that's why a lot of, there isn't a whole lot of that discussion outside of maybe like, speculative fiction about these things, because, you can't prove one way or the other what would have happened if, someone had a disease or didn't, or if people had made different decisions. Um, People often talk about the invasion of Korea as being this very boneheaded move and an example of his insanity. But that's actually one of the decisions that I think was really okay. Obviously it didn't work out, but Hideyoshi had all these very seasoned, veteran, crack troops, these samurai who had just fought this long period of civil war, and survived, which means they were pretty good at what they did. And it really was more of an issue of logistics, you know, quantity, not quality, and also just on the part of the Japanese, not having a high enough estimation of their opponents. They looked down on the Koreans, they looked down on the Chinese. So I don't think they went into battle really prepared for what they actually did face, which was a very um, decent army for that time. They weren't inferior, and they were very good at resistance. The Korean righteous armies, the guerrilla tactics that they used to harass and cut off supplies to the Japanese are well known. Um, so really, only when it comes to like the issue of succession, I mean that's the only thing that I really take issue with. A lot of the other things that he did, Hideyoshi did, I don't think you could really say that those were crazy decisions. Even the massacre of the Catholic martyrs, um, I think made sense. In terms of sending a political message to the Jesuits and the European powers that Japan was not going to quietly allow itself to be converted into a Christian country and therefore under the influence of the Jesuit order and the Catholic Church and so on. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to cover in my this short little epilogue. Actually, I don't know how short it was, but um, until next time, I hope you have a great day. Hopefully, I'll see you soon with the first of the Ieyasu videos. And as always, please leave a comment if you have any feedback or you want to point something out that I missed. I'd love to hear from you. So until next time.